The real gift will be when that old hag ends up in a nursing home. The words sliced through the spring air and into my heart as I stood frozen on my daughter-in-law's porch, the Mother's Day gift bag dangling from my trembling fingers. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but Abigail's window was open, her contemptuous voice carrying clearly across the manicured lawn of the house I was helping them afford. At 60 years old, I discovered my true worth to my son's family somewhere between burden and bank account. Just hours earlier, my son Peter had called with that hesitant tone I'd come to dread. "About tomorrow, Mom, Abigail thinks it would be better to keep Mother's Day small this year, family only." The irony of not being considered family while Abigail's parents were welcome stung like salt in an open wound. "But I am family," I'd protested weakly. "You know what I mean, Mom," he'd sighed, his voice dropping. "Just us, the kids, and Abigail's parents." I'd swallowed my hurt and decided to drop off gifts anyway, pink roses, and a hand-painted teacup set I'd spent my last discretionary dollars on. Perhaps a peace offering would soften Abigail's heart. Instead, I'd overheard the truth she'd been hiding beneath years of thin civility. The teacup set slipped from my hands, shattering on the concrete steps. One sharp fragment sliced my finger as I knelt to gather the pieces, but I barely noticed the pain. What was a small cut compared to the wound her words had carved into my soul, driving home in a daze. Memories flooded my mind. The 2 jobs I'd worked after my husband Frank died suddenly when Peter was 12. The second mortgage I'd taken on our modest home to pay for Peter's college education. The $30,000 I'd withdrawn from my retirement account to fund their lavish wedding. And now, for the past 18 months, the $2, $100 monthly mortgage payment I'd been making on their colonial house in Meadowbrook Estates after Peter lost his job in corporate downsizing. My kitchen felt eerily quiet as I set my purse down and noticed the checkbook on the table. The mortgage payment for their house was already written, waiting to be mailed on Monday. I picked it up, staring at the amount nearly half my monthly income, draining the retirement fund I'd worked decades to build. With sudden clarity, I tore the check in half. Then I called my bank. "Are you sure you want to stop all future payments to this account?" "Mrs. Sullivan," the representative asked. "I'm sure," I replied, my voice stronger than it had felt in years. "That payment stops today." My phone buzzed almost immediately with Peter's name on the screen. I let it ring. Whatever crisis their finances were experiencing could wait until tomorrow. It was Mother's Day, after all, and I would spend it alone, but it would also be the first day of my reclaimed life. 3 days passed before Peter appeared at my door, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. "The bank called about the mortgage payment," he said without preamble, following me into the living room. "What's going on?" I sat in my favorite chair, smoothing my skirt with deliberate calm. "I'm not making the payments anymore, Peter." His face flushed. "You can't just stop. We had an agreement, T. That agreement existed before I heard your wife say that the real Mother's Day gift would be me ending up in a nursing home, before I realized I wasn't welcome at your table while her parents were honored guests. You were spying on us." The accusation in his voice stung. "I came to leave gifts since I wasn't welcome inside. Abigail's window was open." "She didn't mean it," he insisted half-heartedly. "She was just having a bad day." "This isn't about one bad day," I countered. "It's about years of disrespect while I've been emptying my retirement fund to support your lifestyle." I opened the drawer beside me and removed a small notebook. "This is every payment I've made since you married Abigail. The down payment on your house, your wedding, the monthly mortgage payments after you lost your job. It totals over $200,000. Peter, almost everything I had saved for my own future. He stared at the pages, silent for once. But it was never about the money. I continued softly. It was about family. I believed if I just gave enough, helped enough, eventually I would be truly included. Instead, I became an ATM that's tolerated but not respected. Mom, we need that money, he said, his voice smaller now. The bank is threatening foreclosure. Then you'll need to make some difficult choices, I replied. Sell the house. Find something you can actually afford. Is this punishment, he asked. I shook my head. This is self-respect. Peter, I love you. I always will. But I won't set myself on fire anymore just to keep you and Abigail warm. After he left, I walked through my small house, noticing all the things I'd been neglecting while focusing on their needs. The roof that leaked during heavy rain, the ancient furnace that made concerning noises, the arthritis medication I'd been skipping because the copays were too expensive. Outside my window, spring flowers were pushing through the soil in my garden life, continuing after a long winter. I'd planted those bulbs in the fall, an act of faith that I'd be here to see them bloom. Now their vibrant colors seemed like a promise. It wasn't too late to nurture my own life, to see what might grow if I redirected my care toward myself. The phone rang again, Peter's number. This time, I let it go to voicemail. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face whatever came next. For tonight, I would sit in my garden and watch the sunset, enjoying the unexpected peace that came with finally standing up for my own worth. The price of dignity was steep, but as I breathed deeply of the spring air, I knew with bone-deep certainty that it was worth every penny. The morning after my confrontation with Peter, I sat at my kitchen table, reviewing bank statements that told the stark story of my dwindling financial security. Red withdrawal notices marched across the pages like warning flags I'd been willfully ignoring. Each month for the past 18 months, $2, $100 vanished from my account, transferred to Meadowbrook Mortgage Company for a house I'd never live in. Nearly half my monthly income, gone in a single transaction. According to my financial advisor, whom I'd stopped consulting out of embarrassment, I needed at least $380,000 to maintain even a modest standard of living in retirement. I now had less than half that amount, and it was shrinking rapidly. Medicare wouldn't cover all my medical expenses, which would inevitably increase as I aged. Social Security would provide barely enough for groceries and utilities. How had I reached this precipice? The answer lay in 30 years of maternal sacrifice that had somehow morphed from love into exploitation. After losing Frank to a sudden heart attack when Peter was 12, I'd rebuilt our lives from scattered fragments of grief and unexpected debt. Frank's life insurance, a modest $25,000 policy, had barely covered funeral expenses and 3 months of mortgage payments. With a 7th grader to raise and college eventually to fund, I'd faced brutal choices. I took an administrative position at Westfield Insurance during the day and waitressed at Lorenzo's Italian restaurant 4 nights a week. My feet would ache so badly that sometimes I'd soak them in ice water after Peter went to bed, muffling my sobs into a towel so he wouldn't hear. But I smiled every morning as I packed his lunch, attended every baseball game, and somehow managed to help with math homework, despite my own exhaustion. For years, I lived on coffee and determination, putting every spare dollar into Peter's college fund. When he was accepted to State University with only a partial scholarship, I took out a second mortgage on our modest home to cover the remainder. "It's an investment in your future," I told him proudly, never mentioning the crushing weight of that additional monthly payment that would follow me for 15 years. The photo album on my bookshelf chronicled our journey Peter's graduation, his first corporate job at Tech Vision, the day he met Abigail at a company event. She was beautiful and ambitious, with a marketing degree and plans for a career in corporate branding. I was genuinely thrilled when they got engaged, imagining the daughter I'd never had but always wanted. The wedding should have been my first warning sign. When I gently suggested a modest ceremony that wouldn't burden anyone financially, Abigail had fixed me with a look of barely concealed disdain. "This is our special day," she'd said, her voice dripping with patronizing sweetness. "We deserve to celebrate properly. Don't you want that for your son, Mrs. Sullivan?" Of course I did. So I withdrew $30,000 from my 401k, incurring substantial penalties that made my financial advisor wince. The elaborate vineyard reception for 250 guests was certainly beautiful, though I noticed with quiet hurt that I'd been seated at a table far from the wedding party, with distant acquaintances I barely knew. After they married, the financial requests became more frequent, always presented as temporary needs or wise investments. The down payment for their first condo, the small loan for Abigail to start a boutique social media consultancy that never quite took off, the private preschool tuition for my grandchildren, Lily and Max. Because educational foundations are so important, 3 years ago had come the biggest request. Peter arrived at my house one Sunday afternoon, eyes downcast in that way I recognized from childhood, the look that preceded asking for something significant. "The bank won't approve us for the full amount," he'd admitted, turning his coffee mug in circles on my kitchen table. "But it's the perfect house, Mom, in Meadowbrook Estates, the best school district for the kids." I'd offered to help with the down payment, $65,000, that represented the last of my serious savings outside my retirement fund. But then Peter lost his job during Tech Vision's unexpected downsizing, and suddenly they couldn't make the mortgage payments at all. Abigail refused to consider moving to a more affordable home. "We can't disrupt the children's education," she'd insisted, though Lily was only in first grade and Max was still in preschool. That's when I began making their monthly mortgage payments a temporary arrangement that had somehow stretched into 18 months with no end in sight. Each month, I transferred money from my dwindling retirement fund, watching with growing anxiety as my financial security eroded like a sandcastle at high tide. Meanwhile, my own small ranch house developed problems I couldn't afford to fix. The roof leaked during heavy rains. The ancient furnace made concerning noises each winter. The doctor had recommended physical therapy for my worsening arthritis, but the co-payments were too steep, so I quietly managed the pain with over-the-counter medication. I'd begun calculating how many years I could continue this way before I'd be completely broke. The math was unforgiving at the current rate. My retirement fund would be completely depleted within 3 to 4 years. Or after that, what would become of me? Would Peter and Abigail welcome me into that beautiful colonial home I'd been paying for? The thought made me laugh bitterly, remembering Abigail's expression of barely concealed annoyance when I'd stayed with them for just 2 days while my bathroom plumbing was being repaired. "The guest room is Lily's study space now," she'd said, setting up an air mattress in the unfinished basement. The painful truth was that I had funded their lifestyle at the expense of my own security, and in return, I wasn't even welcome at their Mother's Day table. The teacup I'd bought for Abigail seemed almost comically symbolic. Now I'd been pouring my resources into a vessel that was never designed to hold any genuine appreciation for me. Last week, I'd received notice that my property taxes had increased again. My car needed new brakes I couldn't afford. The refrigerator made an ominous humming sound that suggested expensive repairs loomed on the horizon. And still, I'd written that mortgage check, ready to mail it on Monday, continuing the pattern of self-sacrifice that had defined my existence for decades, until I heard those words through Abigail's open window. The real gift will be when that old hag ends up in a nursing home. The cruelty had shocked me, but in a strange way, it had also liberated me. In that moment of painful clarity, I finally saw the truth I'd been avoiding. My financial generosity wasn't building family bonds. It was enabling disrespect. My son and his wife had come to view my support not as acts of love, but as entitlements. The broken teacup on their doorstep represented more than a ruined gift. It was the shattering of an illusion I'd carefully maintained, that if I just gave enough, helped enough, sacrificed enough, I would eventually be truly valued for more than my checkbook. Now, looking at my financial statements spread across the kitchen table, I felt an unfamiliar emotion rising beneath the anxiety anger, not just at Peter and Abigail, but at myself. I had allowed this situation to develop, reinforcing their entitled behavior with each check I wrote. My phone buzzed with yet another text from Peter. "Mom, we need to talk. The bank called again. Please call me back." I set the phone down without responding. Outside my window, spring flowers bloomed in my small garden products of bulbs I'd planted in the fall. An act of faith that I would be here to see them flower. Their vibrant colors seemed to offer a different possibility, that it wasn't too late to nurture my own life, to redirect my resources toward ensuring my own security rather than funding someone else's excess. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reflections. Through the peephole, I saw Peter and Abigail standing on my porch. She held a bouquet of store-bought flowers, a peace offering that seemed laughably inadequate given the circumstances. I straightened my shoulders and opened the door, ready to have a long overdue conversation about the true price of my generosity and the even higher cost of reclaiming my dignity. I opened the door to find Peter and Abigail standing awkwardly on my porch. The bouquet of grocery store carnations in Abigail's hands seemed almost insulting, a $12 peace offering after years of financial exploitation and culminating in that Mother's Day exclusion. "May we come in?" Peter asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I stepped aside wordlessly, letting them enter. In my living room, they perched uncomfortably on the edge of my sofa, the same sofa I'd kept for 15 years, despite the sagging cushions because every spare dollar went to supporting them. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mom," Peter began, leaning forward earnestly, "there's been a misunderstanding with the bank. They said our mortgage payment is past due, and they haven't received any notification about a change in payment status." "There's no misunderstanding, Base," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "I called the bank on Sunday and stopped all future payments." Abigail's artificial smile faltered. "Mrs. Sullivan, I know you're upset about Mother's Day, but surely we can work this out without drastic financial measures." Bang. Her tone carried that familiar condescension, as if explaining something complex to a child. "This isn't about one day," I replied. "This is about a pattern that's gone on for years, a pattern I'm no longer willing to participate in." "What pattern?" Abigail's eyes narrowed defensively. I rose and retrieved the small notebook from my desk, the ledger where I'd recorded every financial gift I'd provided them since their engagement. Wordlessly, I handed it to Peter. His face paled as he flipped through the pages, the $30,000 for their wedding, the $65,000 down payment on their house, the 18 monthly mortgage payments of $100 each, the private school tuition for the children, the loans that were never repaid, all meticulously documented with dates and amounts. This totals over $250,000, Peter, I said quietly. Almost everything I had saved for my retirement. We always intended to pay you back, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Did you win? I gestured around my modest home with its leaking roof and aging appliances. Meanwhile, I've been deferring necessary repairs on my own house, skipping medications because I can't afford the copays, watching my retirement fund dwindle to a point where I'm facing potential poverty in my old age. Abigail shifted uncomfortably. We've been going through a difficult time financially. For 3 years, I interrupted, because that's how long this has been going on. 3 years of me supporting your lifestyle in a house you can't afford, in a neighborhood you chose because it had the right zip code. The schools, Abigail began, are excellent in the Madison district too, I finished, where homes cost half as much. Peter set the notebook down carefully, as if it might explode. Mom, we need that money. Without your help, we'll lose the house. Then you'll lose the house, I said, surprised by my own steadiness. You'll downsize to something within your means, like most adults do when facing financial reality. Is this blackmail? Abigail's voice had an edge now. You're using money to punish us because your feelings got hurt. Something inside me, perhaps the last thread of accommodation I'd clung to, snapped cleanly at her words. Let me be very clear, I said, meeting her gaze directly. This isn't punishment. This is consequence. For years, I've been treated as an ATM rather than a mother and grandmother. I've been excluded from family photos, seated with strangers at your events, and accidentally not informed about gatherings until they were over. I've had presents I sent to my grandchildren intercepted and hidden. Peter's head jerked up at this last revelation. What are you talking about? The birthday cards, the Christmas gifts, the ones that mysteriously never reached Lily and Max. I turned to Abigail. Where did you put them, in a drawer somewhere, or did you simply throw them away? Her flush of guilt was answer enough. And after all that, after years of financial support and emotional dismissal, I wasn't even welcome at your Mother's Day table. Instead, I overheard you say that the real gift would be me ending up in a nursing home. I didn't mean, Abigail started. You did mean it, I interrupted quietly. And hearing that ugly truth was actually a gift. It finally showed me what I've been refusing to see, that no amount of financial sacrifice will ever earn me genuine respect in your home. Peter looked stricken. Mom, please. We'll lose everything. No, you won't, I said. You'll lose a house. You'll lose some status. You'll lose the illusion that you can live beyond your means indefinitely, but you'll still have your family, your health, and the opportunity to rebuild just as I did when your father died and left us with almost nothing. And I stood, signaling the conversation was ending. I love you, Peter. I love my grandchildren, but I won't deplete my retirement fund to maintain your artificial lifestyle anymore. I won't set myself on fire to keep you and Abigail warm. What do you expect us to do? Abigail demanded, her composure cracking. I expect you to act like responsible adults. I answered, sell the house before foreclosure damages your credit. Find a home you can actually afford. Create a budget. Live within your means. As they left Peter shell-shocked, Abigail seething, I felt a strange lightness spreading through me. The pressure that had been crushing my chest for years had lifted. Outside, spring rain began to fall gently on my garden, nourishing the flowers I'd planted months ago. I watched the droplets gather on the petals, each one catching the late afternoon light. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first. The price of that decision would be high-strained family relationships, possible estrangement, the guilt that had been programmed into me as a mother. But the cost of continuing as I had been would be far higher: my security, my dignity, and ultimately, my self-respect. The broken teacup on their doorstep had marked the end of one chapter. Now it was time to see what the next might hold. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended silence after Peter and Abigail left my house. I moved through my routines with a newfound lightness, despite the weight of unresolved family tension. On Wednesday afternoon, I was deadheading roses in my garden when a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Peter stepped out alone, his face drawn with fatigue. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking the entitled edge that had characterized our last conversation. I nodded and led him to the wooden bench beneath my maple tree, its new spring leaves casting dappled shadows across the lawn. "The bank called about foreclosure proceedings," he began, then stopped himself. "No, that's not why I'm here. Or at least, not the only reason." I waited, giving him space to find his words. "I found these in Abigail's desk drawer," he said finally, pulling a stack of envelopes from his jacket pocket. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, all addressed to Lily and Max in my handwriting, all unopened. "There were more," he added quietly. "Going back 3 years. I reached for the cards, my fingers tracing the cheerful stickers I'd placed on each envelope, the careful calligraphy of my grandchildren's names. Each one had contained a small gift and a note expressing my love messages that had never reached their intended recipients. "She told me she was protecting the kids from my manipulative mother," Peter continued, his voice hollow. "Said you were trying to buy their affection to compete with her parents." And the cruelty of it stung anew, but I remained silent. "I didn't know, Mom," he whispered, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I swear I didn't know she was doing this." "What about everything else?" I asked carefully. "The way she spoke to me, the accidental exclusions from family events." He looked away, shame coloring his face. "I knew about some of it," he admitted. "I told myself she was just territorial, that she'd warm up to you eventually. It was easier to believe everything was fine." A chickadee landed on the bird feeder nearby, its cheerful song a counterpoint to our painful conversation. "After you left the other day, Abigail and I had the worst fight of our marriage," Peter continued. "I confronted her about the cards, about how she's treated you all these years. She said I had to choose either you or our family." And what did you say?" "I told her she was defining family all wrong," he said, a firmness in his voice I hadn't heard in years. "That you're my mother, Lily and Max's grandmother, that you've sacrificed everything for us, while her parents, who she always held up as these perfect in-laws, actually lost most of their money in some investment scheme last year and can barely support themselves." This revelation surprised me. Abigail had always spoken of her family as if they were financially secure, making subtle comparisons that left me feeling inadequate. "I never knew that," I said. "Neither did I until recently," Peter admitted. "Abigail kept it hidden. She's been so fixated on maintaining this image of success, this lifestyle we can't actually afford. He rubbed his hands over his face, a gesture reminiscent of his father that made my heart ache. The truth is, Mom, I've enabled all of it. I let Abigail treat you poorly because confronting it would mean confronting our whole house of cards, the financial mess, the pretense, all of it. A breeze stirred the wind chimes hanging from my porch, their gentle melody filling the silence between us. We put the house on the market yesterday, he said finally. The realtor says we'll take a loss, but it's better than foreclosure. Where will you go? I asked. I found a 3-bedroom rental in Madison. It's nothing fancy, but it's in a decent school district and close to my new job. He looked up. I got a position at Meridian Tech. The salary's lower than what I made before, but it's steady work. And Abigail, his expression tightened. She's staying with her sister in Boston for a while. Says she needs space to think. The kids are with me. The implications hung between us. Their marriage was faltering under the weight of exposed truths and financial reality. I'm sorry it's come to this, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in seeing my son's family fracture. I'm the one who should be sorry, Peter replied. For years, I've been taking your help for granted, treating it as an entitlement rather than the tremendous gift it was. And in return, I let my wife exclude you, diminish you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded check. It's not much, just $5,000, the first installment of paying you back. And I studied his face, seeing for the first time in years the boy I'd raised, the one with a strong moral compass and genuine care for others. That boy had been buried beneath years of entitlement and materialistic striving, but he wasn't completely gone. Keep it, I said. Use it for the children. He shook his head firmly. No, Mom, this is about respect, not just money. I need to make this right, even if it takes years. And we sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun warming our shoulders. There's something else I need to ask, Peter said hesitantly. The kids miss you terribly. Would you be willing to see them this weekend? I know it's a lot to ask after everything. Of course, I interrupted, my heart lifting at the thought of hugging my grandchildren again. Bring them any time. Actually, he said, a small smile softening his weary face. I was hoping you might come for dinner. Nothing fancy, probably just spaghetti. I'm still figuring out this cooking thing. The simple invitation, so different from the obligation-laden requests of the past, touched me deeply. This wasn't about money or maintaining appearances. It was about rebuilding genuine connection. I'd love that, I said, as Peter left, promising to call with details. I remained on the bench, watching a monarch butterfly dance among my flowering bushes. The garden I'd been neglecting while focusing on supporting Peter's family had somehow survived, with perennials pushing through soil that hadn't been properly tended in years. Perhaps relationships could be similarly resilient, capable of new growth after periods of neglect or damage. The path forward with Peter wouldn't be simple. There would be difficult conversations, boundary setting, and the complex emotions that come with major life transitions. Abigail might return, requiring us to navigate that complicated dynamic again. Or their marriage might truly be over, bringing a different set of challenges. But for the first time in years, our relationship had something essential that had been missing: honesty. The artificial harmony maintained through financial dependence and silent resentment had been replaced by painful but necessary truth. As I returned to pruning my roses, I felt cautiously hopeful. Standing up for my own dignity hadn't been about punishment or revenge. It had been about creating the possibility for something healthier to grow in place of what had been slowly poisoning us all. The price of dignity had indeed been high, but watching my son begin to reclaim his integrity made it worth every penny. Saturday evening arrived with the gentle anticipation of seeing my grandchildren for the first time in weeks. I'd baked chocolate chip cookies, Lily and Max's favorite, and brought along art supplies for a project I'd been planning since Peter's visit. As I pulled into the driveway of the modest rental house in Madison, my heart lifted at the sight of colorful chalk drawings decorating the sidewalk. Before I could reach the front door, it burst open and two small figures hurtled toward me. "Grandma," Lily cried, wrapping her arms around my waist while Max danced excitedly around us. "We thought you didn't love us anymore," Max exclaimed with the heartbreaking directness of a 6-year-old. I knelt down to their level, setting my bags aside to gather them both in my arms. "I have always loved you," I said firmly, "and I always will. Nothing could ever change that." Peter appeared in the doorway, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. The domestic image struck me so different from the polished, career-focused son who had always left household matters to Abigail. "Dinner's almost ready, Bisquier," he said with a sheepish smile. "Fair warning, the garlic bread is a little enthusiastic." Inside, the rental house was sparsely furnished, but surprisingly homey. Children's artwork adorned the refrigerator. A stack of board games occupied the coffee table. It lacked the magazine-perfect styling of their colonial in Meadowbrook estates, but it felt more welcoming somehow. Dinner was indeed simple: slightly overcooked spaghetti and intensely garlicky bread. But the conversation flowed naturally as Lily and Max caught me up on school projects and neighborhood adventures. We were just starting to clear the dishes when the doorbell rang. Peter's expression tightened. "I wasn't expecting anyone," he said, moving to answer it. Abigail stood on the threshold, perfectly put together as always in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of me. "I decided to come back early," she announced, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've had time to think, and I realize we need to work this out as a family." Her gaze swept critically around the rental house, taking in the mismatched furniture, the children's art projects spread across the dining table, the relatively small space compared to their previous home. "Mommy," the children cried, running to hug her. She embraced them briefly before straightening up. "Why don't you two go play in your rooms for a bit?" she suggested. "The adults need to talk." Once the children were out of earshot, her pleasant facade dropped. "I see you've wasted no time inserting yourself back into their lives," she said coldly to me. Peter stepped forward. "Mom is here because I invited her, because the children missed her, because she's family." "Family," Abigail laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call someone who deliberately forced us into financial crisis, who made us lose our home?" "You lost your home because you couldn't afford it," I replied calmly. "I simply stopped enabling the pretense that you could." Peter gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit down and talk like adults." We arranged ourselves awkwardly, Peter and I, on the sofa. Abigail perched rigidly in an armchair across from us. The physical positioning seemed to underline the shifting alliances between us. I found the cards and gifts. "Abigail," Peter said without preamble, "the ones my mother sent to the children that somehow never reached them." A flush spread across her cheeks, but her chin lifted defiantly. "I was protecting them." From what I asked, genuinely curious about the rationalization she'd constructed. "From knowing their grandmother loves them, from your manipulation," she snapped. "Using gifts to make them prefer you over my parents. Always trying to buy your way into their affection, just like you tried to buy Peter's loyalty for years." The accusation stung, but I recognized it for what it was: projection of her own behavior onto me. "I never saw my gifts to my grandchildren as transactions," I said quietly. "They were expressions of love, nothing more." "Oh, please." Abigail rolled her eyes. "Everything with you has always been about control through money. The wedding you insisted on helping with, the house down payment with all its strings attached." Peter leaned forward. "What strings?" "Abigail, Mom never asked for anything in return except basic respect, which you've consistently denied her. She wanted constant gratitude." Abigail's voice rose. "Constant acknowledgement, as if we should prostrate ourselves in thanks for every dollar." "I never wanted prostration," I interjected. "Just inclusion. Just to be treated as family rather than a checkbook." Abigail's laugh was sharp. "Family. You have no idea what family means. My parents raised me to be independent, to make my own way. They didn't use financial support as leverage to demand emotional payback." "Your parents," Peter said carefully, "lost most of their money in that real estate scheme last year and have been struggling ever since. They couldn't help us, even if they wanted to." "And that's different," she insisted, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Is it," I asked, "or have you been measuring my worth by financial metrics all along, while holding your parents to a different standard?" Silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken truths. "Why did you really come back, Abigail?" Peter finally asked. She smoothed her perfectly styled hair. "This separation is ridiculous. We need to present a united front for the children. My sister's place is too small for an extended stay. And," she hesitated, glancing around the rental house, "we need to discuss how to move forward financially." "You mean you've decided the loss of status and comfort isn't worth the principle of cutting ties with Mom?" Peter translated bluntly. Abigail's eyes narrowed. "I'm being practical. Your salary at Meridian isn't enough for private school tuition. This neighborhood's public schools are adequate at best. And my consulting business needs startup capital again if it's going to succeed this time." I watched my son's face as the full implications of her words registered. There was no mention of love, partnership, or missing him, just financial and social calculations. "I'm not asking Mom for money again," he said firmly. "Ever. We're going to live within our means from now on." "Even if it means the children suffer," Abigail challenged. I couldn't remain silent at this manipulation. "Children don't suffer from financial honesty," I said. "They suffer from watching their parents chase status at the expense of integrity. They suffer from being taught that relationships are transactional." "Easy for you to say," Abigail shot back. "You've made your point now. You've punished us by making us sell the house. You've humiliated us by forcing us into this." She gestured dismissively at the rental home. "This downgrade. Haven't you made your statement? Can't we move past this?" Peter and I exchanged glances, and in that moment of silent communication, I saw that my son truly understood at last. "There's nothing to move past, Abigail," he said quietly. "This isn't a temporary lesson or punishment. This is reality. Mom isn't paying our way anymore. I've taken a job that covers our basic needs. We're living in a home we can actually afford. And you're okay with that?" she asked incredulously. "With this mediocrity?" The word hung in the air between us, mediocrity revealing more about Abigail's values than any argument could have. In the silence that followed, the sound of children's laughter drifted from the bedrooms down the hall, Lily and Max. Blissfully unaware of the adult drama unfolding in the living room, finding joy in simple play rather than material surroundings. I think, Peter said slowly, that I'm finally okay with reality. The question is, are you? Abigail's expression hardened as she realized no financial rescue would be forthcoming, not from me, not from Peter's acquiescence to her demands. The fairy tale she'd constructed was truly ending, leaving only the practical choices that ordinary people make every day. As she stood to leave, claiming she needed time to think, I caught a glimpse of genuine panic beneath her controlled exterior. Without wealth or the appearance of it, who was she? It was a question she'd never had to answer. After she departed, Peter and I called the children back to finish the art project I'd brought, creating handprint flowers on canvas, a keepsake of this transitional time in all our lives. Will Mommy come back to live with us? Lily asked as we mixed paints. Peter met my eyes over her head, his gaze steady. I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on a lot of grown-up decisions. I like this house, Max declared, dipping his small hand into yellow paint. My room has a tree outside the window. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, perhaps it was that simple after all, finding joy in a tree outside the window, rather than status in an expensive zip code. As I helped Max press his paint-covered hand onto the canvas, I felt a profound gratitude for this moment of genuine connection, purchased not with money, but with the priceless currency of truth. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Abigail, I arrived at Peter's rental house bearing a homemade lasagna. Our Sunday dinners had become a new tradition, something simple and genuine that stood in stark contrast to the status-conscious gatherings of the past. As I approached the door, I noticed Peter sitting alone on the front steps, head in his hands. What's wrong? I asked, setting the food aside. He looked up, his expression a mixture of frustration and resignation. The Colonial in Meadowbrook finally sold, short sale. We lost nearly everything we put into it. I sat beside him on the cool concrete step. I'm sorry. I know how much that house meant to you. That's just it, he said, shaking his head slowly. I've been thinking about it, and I'm not sure the house ever really meant anything to me. It was what it represented: success, arrival, the appearance of having it all together. But we were drowning there, Mom, financially, emotionally, in every way that matters. Inside, Lily and Max were working on homework at the kitchen table. They greeted me with enthusiastic hugs before returning to their assignments, a normalcy that seemed impossible just weeks before. Where's Abigail? I asked, noting her absence. Peter's face tightened. She came by yesterday to get more of her things. We had another conversation about the future. The careful way he phrased it told me everything. It didn't go well. She got a job offer in Boston, marketing director for a tech startup. She's taking it. He rubbed his hands over his face. She wants the kids to move there with her. My heart sank. Despite the complicated feelings I had toward Abigail, I never wanted to see my son's marriage end or my grandchildren caught in a custody battle. What did you tell her? That we needed to think about what's best for Lily and Max, not what's most convenient for either of us. He sighed deeply. The truth is, they're settled here now. They've made friends in the neighborhood. They're doing well in school. Uprooting them again so soon would just add more instability to their lives. I busied myself with serving the lasagna, giving Peter space to collect his thoughts. As we sat down to eat, the children's chatter filled the silence between adult concerns, stories about school projects, playground politics, and the stray cat they'd been leaving food for in the backyard. After dinner, when the kids were occupied with a movie in the living room, Peter and I sat at the kitchen table with cups of coffee. I never thought I'd be a single dad, he admitted quietly. But looking back, Abigail and I were heading in different directions long before all this happened. The financial strain just exposed what was already broken. Do you regret it? I asked carefully, standing your ground about not asking me for money again. He considered this for a moment. No, that was the right decision, even if it was the final breaking point. The foundation of our marriage shouldn't have been financial dependence on my mother. He gave me a rueful smile. No offense. None taken, I replied, warming my hands around the coffee mug. What about Meridian Tech? How's the new job going? His expression brightened. Actually, really well. I'm heading up their cybersecurity division. It's challenging work, and I'm good at it. The salary covers our needs, not our wants, necessarily, but our needs. That's no small thing, I observed. No, it isn't, he agreed. And there's something, I don't know, satisfying about earning exactly what we live on, about not pretending to be wealthier or more successful than we are. And through the doorway, I could see Lily and Max curled up together on the sofa, their faces illuminated by the television screen. Despite all the adult turmoil, they seemed resilient, adaptable in the way that children often are when surrounded by genuine love. You're a good father, Peter, I said softly. Whatever happens with Abigail, whatever arrangements you work out, that's the most important thing. He nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. I learned from the best. You know, after Dad died, you kept everything together somehow. 2 jobs, all my activities, college savings. I never really understood what that took until now. The simple acknowledgement warmed me more than any expensive gift ever could have. Not because I needed praise for doing what parents do, but because it represented something we'd lost along the way, recognition of each other as complete human beings with struggles, sacrifices, and dignity. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few short weeks. The painful confrontations and financial reckonings had given way to something unexpected, a more honest relationship with my son, regular time with my grandchildren, and a family dynamic based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The price of dignity had indeed been high. The colonial house was gone. Peter's marriage was likely ending. The appearance of affluence and success they'd maintained for years had been replaced by the humbler reality of a single father in a modest rental, working to rebuild his life. But in that simplicity, something precious had been reclaimed, something that no mortgage payment, no matter how generous, could ever have purchased truth. And with truth as our foundation, perhaps we could build something stronger than what had come before. With the family drama finding its new equilibrium, I discovered an unfamiliar sensation spreading through my day's space. Space to think, to breathe, to consider what I actually wanted from the remaining chapters of my life. Without the constant anxiety about Peter and Abigail's finances draining my emotional energy and retirement savings, I found myself waking each morning with a question I hadn't contemplated in decades. What would bring me joy today? The answer emerged unexpectedly, one rainy afternoon as I cleaned out my storage closet. Behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old tax returns, I discovered a dusty portfolio I hadn't opened in nearly 30 years. Inside were charcoal sketches and watercolors from my college days, before marriage, before motherhood, before the cascade of responsibilities that had gradually submerged my creative impulses. I sat on the floor surrounded by these ghosts of artistic ambition, running my fingers over the careful brushstrokes of a landscape I'd painted during a semester abroad in Italy. My art professor had encouraged me to apply for a prestigious summer program in Florence, a path I'd abandoned when I met Frank and chose what seemed like the more practical route of marriage and a business degree. I wasn't half bad, I murmured to myself, studying a portrait of a young woman whose confident smile betrayed no knowledge of how life would narrow her horizons. Something stirred within me, not quite regret, but a wistful recognition of roads not taken. At 60, was it too late to revisit that fork in the path? The question lingered as I carefully returned the portfolio to its shelf, making a mental note to purchase proper archival storage. The next morning, I drove to Westfield Art Supply, a small store downtown I'd passed countless times without entering. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as I stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the familiar sense of paint, paper, and possibility. "Can I help you find something?" asked the silver-haired woman behind the counter. Her paint-spattered apron and kind eyes immediately put me at ease. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. "I used to paint watercolors, mostly, but it's been decades. I thought I might try again." Her face brightened. "It's never too late to come back to art. The muscle memory is there, just waiting for you to wake it up." An hour later, I left the store with a canvas tote filled with supplies, watercolor paper, a set of professional-grade paints, brushes in various sizes, and a small portable easel. The expense felt simultaneously frivolous and essential, a declaration of intent to myself that this pursuit mattered. That evening, I set up the easel by my kitchen window overlooking the garden and began to paint the sunset, casting golden light across my flowering bushes. My first strokes were hesitant, rusty from disuse, but gradually, as the evening deepened and the colors intensified, something inside me remembered. Something woke up. The finished painting was far from perfect, the perspective slightly off, the colors more timid than I'd intended. But looking at it, I felt a quiet satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. This was something I'd created purely for myself, not to support someone else's needs or dreams. The next day, I researched local art classes and discovered that the community center offered watercolor instruction 3 times a week. Despite the flutter of nervousness in my stomach, would I be the oldest student? Would everyone else be more talented? I signed up for the Tuesday morning session. "Welcome to Watercolor Basics," said the instructor, a gentle-mannered man named Ellis with kind eyes and patience to spare. The class was surprisingly diverse. A college student, a retired firefighter, a young mother who painted while her baby napped in a carrier, and 3 women approximately my age. "You've done this before," Ellis observed, watching me mix colors during our first exercise. I nodded. "A lifetime ago." "The paper remembers," he said with a smile, "and so do your hands." After class, one of the other women, Martha, a widow like myself, invited me to join her and some friends for coffee at the cafe across the street. "First class is always the hardest," she said, as we settled at a corner table with her friends Judith, Eleanor, and Doris. "We thought you might need moral support." The coffee shop was warm and inviting, filled with the rich aroma of freshly ground beans and the gentle hum of conversation. I'd expected awkward small talk, but instead found myself drawn into a lively discussion about books, local politics, and the upcoming art exhibition at the county gallery. "You should submit something," Judith suggested when I mentioned I was picking up painting again. "Oh, I couldn't," I protested. "I'm just a beginner again." "We're all beginners again at something," Eleanor said wisely. "That's the beauty of our age. We get to reinvent ourselves." Reinvention. The word lingered in my mind as I drove home, as I prepared dinner, as I set up my easel again to practice the techniques Ellis had taught that morning. Was that what I was doing? Not just reclaiming an old hobby, but reinventing my identity beyond Peter's mother, or financial supporter, or even wronged mother-in-law. Over the following weeks, a new routine emerged: art classes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, coffee with my new friends afterward, conversations that ranged from deeply philosophical to delightfully trivial. Saturday mornings in my garden, sketching the changing light and blooming flowers. Sunday dinners at Peter's house with Lily and Max, who showed genuine interest in my artwork and begged for lessons of their own. My small living room gradually transformed as well. The faded family photographs still occupied the mantel, but now they shared space with my own creations, landscapes, still lifes, and abstracts that documented my improving skills. The house felt more fully mine somehow, a reflection of my evolving self rather than just a repository of memories. One Thursday after class, Martha mentioned that her church had an empty room they were converting to an art therapy space for seniors and at-risk youth. "They need volunteer instructors," she said casually. "Just basic techniques, nothing fancy. I mentioned you might be interested." Me. I was startled. I'm still learning myself. Sometimes the best teachers are those who remember what it's like to be a beginner, Ellis commented, overhearing as he cleaned brushes nearby. "You have a natural way of explaining techniques, Margaret. I've noticed it when you help others in class." The idea both terrified and excited me. Teaching art even basic skills seemed presumptuous, yet the thought of sharing this reclaimed joy with others, particularly those who might benefit from creative expression during difficult times, held undeniable appeal. "I'll think about it," I promised. That evening, Peter called to ask if I could watch the children on Saturday. "I have a job interview," he explained. "It's for a position with better advancement opportunities than Meridian. The kids mentioned you're teaching them to paint. Just simple watercolor techniques," I said, surprised they'd mentioned it. "Nothing formal." "They love it," he said. "Lily told me she wants to be an artist like Grandma when she grows up." My throat tightened unexpectedly. I'd hardly call myself an artist yet. "Why not?" Peter challenged gently. "You're creating art. That makes you an artist." After we hung up, I stood before my easel where a half-finished landscape waited. In the soft evening light, I saw the painting with new eyes, not focusing on its flaws, but appreciating its earnest attempt to capture beauty. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps the act of creation itself, however imperfect, was the point. I picked up my brush and continued working, adding layers of color and depth as the sky outside darkened. In the reflection of the window glass, I caught a glimpse of myself, a woman of 60, brush in hand, completely absorbed in the joy of creating something from nothing. This, too, was dignity. Not the dignity of standing firm against disrespect or financial exploitation, but the quieter dignity of honoring one's own passions, of claiming space for personal growth even in life's later chapters. The price had been high, but the canvas before me, like the evolving story of my life, was blooming with unexpected colors and possibilities I never could have imagined when this journey began. 1 year later, I stood in the small gallery space at the Westfield Community Center, hardly believing the moment had arrived. Around me hung 20 watercolor paintings, my first public exhibition, each piece capturing moments of beauty I discovered in this new chapter of life. In the corner, a special canvas displayed the handprint flowers I'd created with Lily and Max, a reminder of how far we'd all come. Mother's Day had arrived again, but this year couldn't have been more different. Peter and the children had spent the morning helping me prepare for the exhibition opening, arranging refreshments and adjusting lighting. My art class friends Martha, Judith, Eleanor, and Doris had brought flowers and moral support in equal measure. As visitors began to arrive, I spotted Peter greeting a woman at the door, Abigail. They had finalized their divorce 6 months ago, but had gradually established a cordial co-parenting relationship. She lived in Boston now, visiting the children twice monthly. To my surprise, she approached me with a small gift bag. "Congratulations," she said, her smile tentative but genuine. "The children talk about your painting constantly. I wanted to see for myself." Inside the bag was a delicate silver paintbrush charm on a chain, a peace offering of sorts. Some wounds heal cleaner than others, I reflected as I thanked her. Some relationships transform rather than end. As I looked around at the gallery filled with people who truly saw me not as a financial resource or an obligation, but as a woman with talents and value of her own, I realized that dignity, once reclaimed, creates ripples that can transform every aspect of life. Dear friends, this story carries a profound truth that took me 60 years to learn. Your worth is never measured by what you give, but by the respect you receive in return. Generosity without boundaries isn't love, it's exploitation that harms both the giver and receiver. Many of us, especially parents and grandparents, believe that sacrifice equals love. We empty our financial and emotional accounts, believing that somehow this depletion proves our devotion. But when we allow others to take without respect, we teach them that relationships are transactional rather than sacred. The most loving thing you can sometimes do for yourself and for those you love is to stand firm in your dignity. It may cost relationships temporarily. It may force difficult conversations. It may even lead to painful separations. But ultimately, it creates the possibility for something authentic to grow in place of dynamics built on unhealthy patterns. Remember, you cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your life has intrinsic value beyond what you provide materially. And it's never, ever too late to reclaim your dignity or to pursue dreams that nourish your soul. Has someone in your life treated you as an ATM rather than a person? Have you struggled to set boundaries with family members who take without appreciation? Or perhaps you found the courage to stand firm like Margaret did. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful life lessons woven through narratives that reflect our shared human struggles. Together, we're building a community of people committed to authentic living and loving with healthy boundaries. Remember, the price of dignity may be high, but living without it costs even more.